now we're going to work on section 9.2, which honestly in all of this unit 4 is probably the one that people will struggle with the most. So if you need help, please be sure and contact me. 9.2 and 9.1 we talked about graphing a point, and we talked about every point has an ordered pair that goes with it. We call the first number how much you go across the x value, and the second number in the ordered pair we call the y value. So that's why you'll often hear this say graph this on an xy plane. Okay, so in section 9.2, now instead of just graphing one little dot, we're going to be trying to graph a line. Okay, so in order to graph a line, we're going to use the table method. We're not using slope, we're not using y-intercepts, we're not using any of that stuff that you may remember from your previous algebra class. In this class, we're going to use the table method. And so I want you to try to use that table method. If you can use the others, yay for you, but table method's really the simplest way to do it. And so that's what we're going to be talking about. In the table method, you're going to figure out a pair of numbers that will work in the equation, okay? And some of these, it's real easy to just look at and come up with them, and some of them you have to do a little bit of math. If you come up with one letter, how do you get the other letter? So that's why this is going to be done in 3 different parts, okay? Once you come up with 2 points, that's all you have to have in order to graph on the computer. When you graph it, you will see on the computer your little graph. There is a little magnifying glass if you need to make it bigger. If you're like me, I have to make it bigger because I can't see. And so that will expand it up a little bit. And then up in the corner, you'll see a bunch of little icons of different looking kind of graphs, and you're going to click on the one that looks like it's a line, okay? Then you go to your graph, you find your first point, and you hit the end button, and that will click on a point. And all of a sudden, your line will start going however you want to go. And then you find your second point and click on it, and then the computer will automatically draw a line between those 2 points that you do. Now, if you mess up, if you meant to go backwards 2 and you went forwards 2, then you have to hit the clear button and start all over. Click on the little line up here, click on your first dot, click on your second dot, and then it will make you a graph, and then hit enter and it will grade your answer. So it may take a little bit of experimenting for you to get down how to actually graph on the computer, but keep practicing it and you're going to be good at it. So let's talk about how we do the first part then, coming up with the 2 points, okay? The first kind of equation that we're going to talk about, I call an independent line. You've got x and you have y, and they are together on this side of the equation, and they equal a particular number. The x and the y are on the same side, and they equal one particular number. Here's some examples. X plus y equals 10. X plus y equals 4. X minus y is equal to 5. X minus y is equal to -2. So I'm going to do these 4 examples to show you how we come up with them. Let's start with this one. A table method, you make a little T-chart, kind of like we did when we were doing factors. Put the x first and then the y, okay? Now, you want a pair of numbers that would work in this equation. In other words, I'm telling you in this equation, take x, add it to y, and get 10. So let's think of something that when I add them together, I get 10. Well, I came up with 3 and 7, okay? Yay, that's 1 point. Come up with another one. How about 5 and 5? Okay, I've come up with another one. There are a million different numbers that you can add together to get 10. Personally, I only deal with the positive ones because that way I don't get myself confused with the signs. So come up with 2 pairs of numbers that work in this equation. That's all it is. Just look at the equation, come up with it. So now I have my 2 pairs. So now I'm going to get on my little graph, and I'm going to graph 3, 7. So I would start here and go 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Put a dot. My next one is 5 and 5. Put a little dot. And then my computer will draw a line, through my little dots. That's all I have to do. If I had x plus y equals 4, make your little T-chart, probably on your scratch sheet of paper. Now, give me a pair of numbers that when you add them, you're going to get a positive 4. Let's see, 1 and 3, 2 and 2, there you go. All right, so that gives you two numbers, two pairs of numbers that when you add them together, it works in this equation. Get on your little graph, 1, 3, 2, 3, 2, 2, and then we'll draw your little graph for you. Okay? So the adding ones really are fairly simple. You just have to make sure that these two numbers add up to give you that one. Well, what if I have a minus in the middle? This tells me that x minus y is equal to 5. So when I do my little charts, please notice that you are subtracting the x and the y, and you're going to get a positive number. Does everybody see that? So that means that the x had to be bigger than the y in order for me to get that positive number. So I want to know two numbers that when I subtract them, I get 5. Well, how about 6 and 1? 6 minus 1 would give me 5. Do we all agree? Now, please notice that this y is not negative. This sign that's in here is the math. It is not part of this letter. Okay? That's not 6 minus a minus 1. It's just 6 and then minus the 1. The y is exactly what you put here. This is the sign that tells you what math to do. Don't get those confused. I need another pair of numbers. Give me two more numbers that when I subtract them. 5 and 0. There you go. Don't pick real huge numbers. Just pick small numbers that will work. All right. When you graph it then, 6, 1 would be right there. 5, 0 would be right there. And then you would have your little line drawn. Okay? Our last example, if you have x minus y is equal to negative 2. Well, this time I'm telling you that you're going to subtract the x and whatever you pick for y, and I'm going to get a negative number. Well, if you subtracted and got a negative number, then that tells you that the positive number was smaller than what the y was. So because I'm subtracting these and getting a negative, then that's telling me that the x is going to be smaller than my y, because remember when you subtract, you keep the sign of the biggest. So now I would put the 6 here, and maybe a 4 here, okay? If you have 4 minus a 6, this subtract sign turns that 6 into negative when you do the math, and that's why you have a negative 2 here. If you had 3 and 1, okay, notice I kind of thought of my y first and then figured out what my x is. You need to make absolute sure that if you replace just the letters with just the numbers here, that math would work out like we talked about in 9.1. When you graph, you have your little graph, and there you go. You have it in business. So when you're graphing independent lines, think of two numbers together that would work in the math of the problem. If you're adding them, remember, if they're the same sign, it's going to keep the same sign at the end. If they're different signs, it's not going to keep the same sign at the end. So be careful with it. Come up with two numbers that would work in the equation, use the graphing tool, and then you'll be ready to graph independent lines.